people at the top of a power food chain tend to live longer than those that don't because they have different stress and whatever. That's very true. But then
Yeah.
it's the relational nature of him and his environment.
Right.
Agreed. And he's also part of a generation, I believe, that still had sufficient, according to a lot of the data anyway, that as well as he would have sufficient other species present in higher numbers during critical adolescent and youth.
Because he didn't have antibiotic exposure when he was younger. Like the investigative piece now on this calcibactin level that's going up due to E. coli, which is where they think maybe this colorectal cancer is coming from, likely is because there's missing keystone species that are not in a good relationship creating that suppression. What do you think we got antimicrobials from?
Yeah.
Antimicrobials from bacteria are just this, what we're talking about. To shape
Penicillin.
the relationships in the gut.
Well, and the statins that the president takes, well, that's extending his lifespan, and those statins come from yeast originally, and obviously modified by humans, but yeah,
It's very true.
But this is what I'm
A lot of
saying.
the initial strategy, and then sometimes we hold on, grab that, and then kind of steer it because we have thought. We can iterate fast if we need to.
Well, I'm going to add to that. I know a family that I was close to. Most of their family members lived into the 90s, almost 100 years old is their average, and they're an original American family. We're talking goes back to the Mayflower days, right? And original landholders from the 1600s. And I can tell you, I do not agree with the diet of one of the ones who is in mid to late 80s right now. If you had your Olive Gardens and your lobster, the lobster chains and things like that around the corner, I mean, that's all she eats pretty much. Like whenever I tried to make, she'll take homemade bread from me, but if I try to make vegetables like asparagus, how dare I not trim all the way several joints up because it's too fibrous. Like I was cutting off more than half of the asparagus and throwing it away. I'm thinking, what a waste, right? This is not how I eat. And fibrous, root area connections. Sometimes I will actually overcook them or prepare them differently to be able to make them more consumable. No, and she's got to have her sugars and desserts every day. And she did have antibiotics growing up. But you know what? She has still the older, representation of gut species that helped raise her because she was raised on the farm, her family farm, right? And she was raised on those foods from the farm back in the day before she went off to college. And when she was in college was when McDonald's actually first started. So around that time, right, as a chain nationally. So of course she got into McDonald's and she lived in California where it was really promoted. But you know what? Comparatively speaking, and with all other incidents aside, like she's had some health incidents that were more like accident related and things. She's one of the most active people at that age that I know. She still drives. One of her relatives was driving till age 90. It was a little scary at times, but I think they had some of the species that declined between 1950 to now, say. Their species were intact enough that they're able to have a better health score. She never developed diabetes. I can't believe the amount of sweets she has. Honestly.
Well, you know what? One part about this that I've thought about is, the older generation, who are now in their 70s and 80s, they didn't necessarily, go and sit in a chair at a desk when they started right after college. They were, doing things on their feet or maybe working. And so, but a lot of my generation, as soon as we left college, we sat in a chair at a desk all day and then we got in our car and drove home. And so, physical activity is a forced thing. And then it became a leisure activity and then obviously a health thing. But, just, now that I stand at my desk, I feel so much better than, when I was sitting all day. And I felt the difference, versus for many years I sat at a desk and didn't get, now we're trying to get our 10,000 steps in because we realize it's important. But yeah, back in the 50s and 60s, well, that, people didn't sit at a desk for their job, at least as a percent of population, in my view.
Exercise is a great deal to it. I mean, for myself, until just a few years ago, for other reasons, I was overly active. I trained like an athlete most of my life when I could. So I do know I have seen that association, and I do know that most of the people that are very athletic or choose to be are much better off, because I mean, these are people who, there's a woman that I know who she's approaching, I think 72-ish in age, but she's ballroom dancing and she's more flexible than 20-year-olds.